The words hit me like a sudden gust of wind in the confined cabin, knocking the breath out of me as I sat there, buckled in and ready for takeoff. I absolutely refused to sit next to that man, the elderly woman announced to the flight attendant, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and indignation that made my heart sink. She stood in the aisle, clutching her boarding pass, her eyes locked on me with an unspoken accusation that left me wondering what invisible crime I'd committed this time, and how this stranger's judgment could unravel the fragile peace I'd built for myself on this ordinary flight. The entire plane seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the confrontation to unfold, creating a tense void that begged the question, what would happen if her bias put her in a position where she had no choice but to rely on the very person she despised? My name is Kareem Hassan, and I've learned over the years that life has a way of testing your resolve in the most unexpected places, like the cramped rows of an airplane hurtling through the sky at 30,000 feet. I was 38, a dedicated cardiologist at Chicago General Hospital, where I'd spent countless hours in the operating room, mending hearts that beat with the same rhythm as anyone's, regardless of their background or beliefs. That morning, I had boarded Flight 247 from New York to Los Angeles after a grueling 3-day medical conference on advanced cardiac interventions. The event had been held at a sleek convention center in Manhattan, filled with colleagues from around the world sharing breakthroughs in treating arrhythmias and heart failure. I'd presented a paper on a new, minimally invasive procedure I'd developed, one that could reduce recovery time for patients by weeks. The applause had been gratifying, a brief moment where my expertise shone brighter than any preconceived notions about my appearance or faith. But as I left the podium, I couldn't shake the subtle glances from some attendees, the ones that lingered a second too long on my beard or the way I excused myself for afternoon prayers in a quiet corner. The airport had been a whirlwind of activity, the kind that always put me on edge. LaGuardia was packed with holiday travelers, the air thick with the scent of coffee and pretzels from the food courts. I navigated the security line with the usual routine, shoes off, laptop out, and that inevitable random selection for additional screening. The TSA agent patted me down methodically, his expression neutral, but I felt the weight of eyes from the queue behind me. It was nothing new. Since I was a teenager, these moments had become part of my reality. My parents had immigrated from Pakistan when I was 5, seeking the American dream in a small apartment in Queens. They worked tirelessly, my father as a cab driver, my mother as a seamstress, to give my brother and me a better life. They taught us the pillars of Islam: faith, prayer, charity, fasting, and pilgrimage. Kareem, my mother would say, her voice soft as she adjusted my prayer cap. Always respond to ignorance with kindness. Allah sees your heart. As I settled into seat 14B, a middle spot in economy, I tried to push those thoughts aside. The window seat was taken by a young woman in her early 20s, headphones in, scrolling through her phone. She smiled briefly when I stowed my carry-on, a black backpack containing my laptop, a change of clothes, and a small Quran for comfort during flights. The aisle seat remained empty until she arrived, the old lady, her silver hair neatly coiffed, wearing a light blue cardigan over a floral blouse, pulling a wheeled suitcase that clattered against the seats. Her name, I would later learn, was Margaret Wilkins, a widow from a small town in Ohio, flying to visit her granddaughter in California. She glanced at her ticket, then at me, and her expression hardened. It was as if time slowed. I saw the judgment form in her eyes, perhaps triggered by my olive skin, the neatly trimmed beard I'd grown as a symbol of my faith, or the subtle way my accent lingered on certain words despite years in America. "No," she said firmly to the flight attendant approaching behind her. "I can't sit here. Please find me another seat." The attendant, a woman in her 40s with a name tag reading Carla, looked confused. "Ma'am, the flight is completely full. This is your assigned seat. Is there an issue with the legroom or something?" Margaret crossed her arms, her voice rising just enough to draw attention from nearby passengers. "The issue is him. I don't feel comfortable. You see things on the news, and I can't." My face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and frustration. Whispers started around us. A man in the row ahead turned to look. A couple across the aisle exchanged glances. I kept my gaze fixed on the seat back in front of me, my hands clasped in my lap to hide their slight tremble. This wasn't the first time. In my daily life, I'd encountered it in subtle ways. The cab that passed me by on a rainy night, the store clerk who followed me through aisles, the patient at the hospital who requested a different doctor upon seeing my name tag. Each instance chipped away at me, but I had learned to respond with composure. "It's all right," I said quietly to Carla. "If there's any way to switch, I don't mind." Carla sighed, checking her tablet. "I'm afraid not, sir. We're overbooked as it is. Ma'am, please take your seat so we can prepare for takeoff." Margaret huffed, finally sliding into 14A with exaggerated reluctance, her body angled away from me as if I carried some contagious ailment. She muttered something under her breath about safety concerns, and I felt a pang in my chest, not physical, but emotional, the kind that made me question if all my achievements could ever erase the label others slapped on me. As the plane taxied, I closed my eyes and recited a silent dua. "O Allah, guide me to what is right and forgive those who wrong me." It helped center me, reminding me that my worth wasn't defined by strangers' fears.
The takeoff was smooth, the engines roaring as we lifted into the gray New York sky. I pulled out my book, a collection of Rumi's poetry, seeking solace in lines like, "Let the beauty we love be what we do." But concentration was hard with Margaret's presence beside me, her discomfort palpable. She fidgeted, adjusting her seatbelt, glancing at me every few minutes. The young woman next to me, Lena, removed her headphones and leaned over. "That was rude," she whispered. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that." I smiled faintly. "Thank you. It's unfortunately not uncommon." Lena introduced herself, a college student from UCLA, majoring in sociology, returning from a visit to her parents. We chatted quietly about her studies on social biases, how media shaped perceptions. It was a small comfort, a reminder that not everyone saw the world through a lens of suspicion. Meanwhile, Margaret flagged Carla for a glass of water, then turned to me unexpectedly. "You know, people have a right to feel safe," she said, her tone defensive. I nodded politely. "Of course, but safety comes from understanding, not assumptions." She snorted. "Easy for you to say." Her words stirred memories of my brother, Tariq. He was 2 years younger, an engineer in Chicago, who had faced similar rejections, job interviews that went well until they saw his full name on the resume. "We just keep pushing," he'd say during our weekly phone calls. Tariq and I were close. He'd been my confidant through med school when the pressure nearly broke me. "Remember Dad's story," he'd remind me. Our father had once been pulled over for looking suspicious while driving his cab, but he responded with calm, even offering the officer directions when he realized he was lost. That story had become family lore, a lesson in dignity. As the flight continued, the captain announced we'd hit cruising altitude and the seatbelt sign dinged off. Passengers stirred, some heading to the lavatories, others ordering drinks. I ate the lunch Aisha had packed, a turkey sandwich on whole wheat with apples and dates. Aisha, my wife of 12 years, was the light in my life. We'd met in undergrad. Her Irish-American background a contrast to mine, but our shared values bridged any gap. She had converted to Islam after researching for months, drawn to its emphasis on justice and compassion. "It's about the heart," she'd said on our wedding day. Now she taught high school English in our suburb, raising our sons Zayn and Amir with stories of prophets and American history alike. I missed them already. Zayn's soccer games, Amir's drawings of airplanes like the one I was on. About an hour in, the plane hit light turbulence, the kind that makes cups rattle and stomachs flip. Margaret clutched her armrest, her face paling. At first, I thought it was motion sickness, but as a doctor, I noticed the subtle signs. Her hand pressing to her chest, a slight gasp for air. She waved off Carla when she asked if everything was okay, insisting it was nothing, but her color drained and sweat beaded on her forehead. My medical instincts kicked in, but I hesitated. After her earlier behavior, would she accept help from me? The conflict gnawed at me, my Hippocratic oath versus the hurt she inflicted. Lena noticed too. "She doesn't look good," she said. "Should we say something?" I nodded, leaning over cautiously. "Ma'am, are you feeling all right? You seem a bit unwell." She shot me a sharp look. "I'm fine, leave me alone." Her rejection stung, but I persisted gently. "If it's chest pain, it could be serious. I'm a cardiologist. I can help if you need." "A cardiologist?" she echoed, skepticism in her voice. "Right, and I'm the Queen of England." Lena interjected. "He's telling the truth. I saw his conference badge earlier." Margaret turned away, but her breathing labored more. The turbulence passed, but her discomfort didn't. I thought of my patients back home, elderly folks like her, often stubborn about symptoms until it was almost too late. One, Mrs. Jenkins, had dismissed her angina for weeks, leading to a major event. I had saved her in the ER, her gratitude a reminder why I did this work. As time ticked by, the situation escalated. Margaret began rubbing her left arm, a classic sign of cardiac distress. Her groans grew louder, drawing attention from other passengers. A man in the row behind us, a businessman named Mr. Ellis, leaned forward. "Is she okay? I have aspirin in my bag." Carla returned, concern etched on her face. "Ma'am, what's wrong?" "It hurts. My chest," Margaret admitted weakly. Carla's eyes widened. "I'll get the medical kit. Is there a doctor on board?" she called over the intercom. The cabin fell silent. Then I raised my hand. "Here, I'm Dr. Kareem Hassan, cardiologist." Murmurs rippled through the plane. Carla hurried over, handing me the kit. Margaret stared at me, her eyes wide with a mix of shock and desperation. "You?" "Yes," I said calmly, unbuckling to kneel in the aisle. "May I check your pulse?" She nodded, too weak to argue. Her wrist was clammy, her heartbeat irregular. Ventricular tachycardia, I suspected. "Have you had heart problems before?" I asked, pulling out my stethoscope from my backpack. "Angina," she whispered. "Pills in my purse." I found the nitroglycerin, administering it under her tongue. "Breathe slowly, in through your nose, out through your mouth." The plane hit another pocket of air, adding to the suspense. Passengers watched, some offering help. Lena held Margaret's hand, Mr. Ellis fetched oxygen from the crew. I monitored her vitals with the kit's blood pressure cuff, noting hypertension. "We need to stabilize her," I told Carla. "Radio the captain for possible diversion and prepare the defibrillator, just in case." Margaret's eyes met mine, tears forming. "Why are you doing this after how I treated you?" "Because it's what anyone deserves. No one should suffer alone." As the medication took effect, her rhythm steadied, color returning to her cheeks. The immediate crisis passed, but the emotional one peaked. "I was afraid," she confessed. "My husband was in the military, lost friends in conflicts. I let it turn to bitterness." "I'm sorry for your loss," I said sincerely, "but fear doesn't define us unless we let it." We talked then, the plane's hum a backdrop. She shared about her life, raising kids, losing her husband to cancer, her granddaughter's birth bringing joy. I spoke of my family, my work, how faith guided me through hardships. Lena joined, discussing generational changes. Mr. Ellis listened, later sharing his own story of overcoming biases in business. The captain announced we'd continue to LA with medics waiting. Applause broke out as I returned to my seat. Margaret squeezed my hand. "Thank you, Dr. Hassan. You've opened my eyes." Landing brought relief. Paramedics boarded, taking Margaret on a stretcher. She waved, promising to stay in touch. Aisha met me at baggage claim, her embrace erasing the day's strain. "You did good," she whispered. Weeks later, Margaret called. We met for coffee when she visited Chicago, her treating me to lunch, apologizing again. She attended an interfaith event at our mosque, making friends. It became a bond, her sending cards to my kids, me checking on her health. That flight changed us. I spoke at conferences about empathy in medicine, advocating against discrimination. At home, I taught Zain and Amir, strength is in kindness.